Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. What I love about these deep dives is that we get to really unearth these fascinating stories. And today we're going to be doing that through, get this, personal blog posts, historical accounts, even a food blog, all centered around housing in Israel.
Wow, that's quite a mix of sources. I'm really curious to see how those all connect.
Me too. And that's what makes this deep dive so unique. We're going to be tracing the evolution of housing in Israel through the lens of one family's experience, starting all the way back in the 1960s, during those early years of Israel's founding.
The 1960s. A time of incredible change and upheaval, and a period of mass immigration to Israel, right?
You got it. Picture this. It's the 1960s, Israel is newly formed, and there's this massive wave of immigration happening. Hundreds of thousands of people, all needing homes, seeking a fresh start. Among them is the Portal family, arriving from Morocco, full of hope and ready to build a new life.
It must have been both exhilarating and overwhelming to arrive in a brand new country, especially during such a pivotal time.
Absolutely. And you can imagine the challenges, right? The country was still finding its footing, resources were stretched thin. And for families like the Portals, their new home wasn't exactly what you'd call conventional.
You're talking about the Ma'abaro.
Exactly. These temporary tent cities set up to accommodate the huge influx of immigrants.
It was a stopgap measure. The idea was to provide immediate shelter while more permanent housing was being built.
Which, on paper, makes sense. But I'm sure the reality was a lot more complicated.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine 1 million people arriving in a country in just over a decade. 1 million! The strain on resources, the cultural shifts, the sheer logistics of it all. The Ma'abaro, while necessary, became symbols of the growing pains of a new nation.
Wow. 1 million people, that's almost unfathomable. To think the Portal family was right in the thick of it, and their story, well, it doesn't shy away from the difficulties. They went from a comfortable life in Morocco to facing real poverty in the Ma'abara.
And that's something that often gets lost in the broader historical narratives, isn't it? The human cost of these massive shifts.
Yeah, their blog posts really paint a vivid picture of this time. Can you imagine leaving everything familiar behind and ending up in a tent city? A whole other world.
Absolutely. Especially for immigrants from North Africa like the Portals, they faced not only the challenges of poverty, but also cultural barriers, discrimination. It was a difficult period, and their story speaks volumes about the resilience of those early immigrants, their determination to build a better life no matter the odds.
And the father, especially, seemed determined to create a better life for his family. He was the one, according to his children, who never gave up hope.
That grit, that determination, it's a recurring theme we see throughout history, isn't it? People faced with extraordinary circumstances finding the strength to not just survive, but to rebuild.
It's inspiring, to say the least.
Yeah.
And their story, well, it's just beginning. As I was digging through these blog posts, something kind of funny jumped out at me.
Bourekas.
Bourekas, as a main theme in their lives? Well, not exactly a main theme. But it turns out Bourekas played a surprisingly central role in their early years in Israel, like a staple food.
Oh, that's interesting. Food can be such a powerful lens to view history through. What we eat, especially in times of scarcity or transition, speaks volumes.
Totally. And the blog posts really highlight that. For them, Bourekas seemed to be about more than just sustenance. It was almost like a symbol of their experience.
Makes sense. For those listening who might not be familiar, what exactly is a Boureka? I feel like we need a crash course here.
Yes, please. I'm picturing them in my head, but I'm sure you can explain it way better.
Okay, so picture this. Imagine flaky, crispy layers of dough, like phyllo dough, but maybe a little more substantial. And they can be filled with all sorts of savory goodness. Cheese, spinach, potatoes, even spiced meats.
Oh, yum. Those sound so good, like a little savory pie almost.
Right. And the beauty is they're so versatile. You can eat them hot, cold, as a snack, part of a meal. And in Israel, they're everywhere. Street vendors, bakeries, they even have those little frozen ones you can bake at home.
Which, thinking about it, probably made them a lifesaver for families like the Portals. Affordable, easy to make, practical.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, this was a time of austerity in Israel. Resources were stretched thin, so having a food that was both delicious and affordable, well, it would have been a godsend.
Totally. And you know what I find fascinating? It wasn't just about convenience. According to the blog, Bourekas also became a way for these new immigrants to hold on to their culinary traditions, even as they were adapting to a new life.
That's so true. Think about it, the ingredients, the flavors, they all harken back to the diverse cultural heritage of these immigrants.
Mhm.
Sephardic Jews coming from places like Morocco, Spain, they brought their own unique culinary traditions with them.
It's amazing how something as simple as a pastry can tell such a complex story.
Right. It's a reminder that food is never just about sustenance. It's culture, it's history, it's identity, all baked into those delicious flaky layers.
So Bourekas, they kept things interesting, right? I mean, food-wise.
Yeah.
But those ma'abaro, not exactly a long-term solution. Eventually, the Portal family, along with so many others, they transitioned from these tent cities to, well, what was supposed to be more permanent housing.
Government-built housing projects, right,
Yeah.
intended to provide more stability, better living conditions. It seemed like a step up from those temporary tent cities.
Exactly. But as we often see, the reality of these large-scale projects, it's rarely that simple.
Because you're moving from a temporary, often chaotic situation to something that's intended to be more permanent. And with that comes a whole new set of challenges, both for the residents and for the urban planners trying to meet those needs.
And the Portal family's experience. Well, their blog posts about this time, let's just say they don't sugarcoat anything. Cramped living spaces, lack of green areas for the kids, very few job opportunities in these new neighborhoods. Sounds kind of isolating, honestly. And there was even a recurring plumbing issue in their building. Imagine that stress.
It's easy to overlook those everyday struggles when we think about these large-scale housing projects. The focus is often on the buildings themselves, the numbers, but it's those daily inconveniences, those systemic issues that really shape people's experiences.
Exactly. And it kind of highlights this global phenomenon, right? These good intentions, these big plans to provide affordable housing, but then they sometimes end up, well, not quite living up to the hopes.
And it's a complex issue with no easy answers. You have these projects that are often built in response to a crisis, like the mass immigration to Israel in the 60s. So speed and scale are prioritized, maybe sometimes at the expense of long-term planning or community input.
And it's not just an Israeli phenomenon, right? We see similar challenges with public housing projects in the US, in Europe. It's like this universal struggle to get it right, to balance individual needs with the needs of a growing, changing population.
Absolutely. And it requires a constant reevaluation, a willingness to learn from the past and to adapt to the ever-evolving needs of the people these projects are meant to serve.
And that's what makes the rest of the Portal family story so remarkable. Because despite all of these obstacles, the father, he never gave up on this dream, on this hope for a better future. And get this, he ended up becoming an architect himself.
You're kidding. That's amazing.
It is. And what's even more incredible is that he ended up specializing in, guess what? Rehabilitating those very same housing projects that he and his family had lived in.
Wow. Talk about coming full circle. That's powerful.
Right. Imagine that perspective. He'd experienced firsthand the shortcomings of these well-intentioned projects. But instead of just, complaining or giving up, he used those experiences, that knowledge, to try to make a real difference.
And it speaks to the power of lived experience, doesn't it? He wasn't just approaching this from a theoretical standpoint. He understood the challenges, the frustrations of the residents because he had been one himself.
And he fought for practical solutions. Larger living spaces, more green areas, community centers. He even helped to establish job training programs, recognizing that people needed more than just a roof over their heads. They needed opportunity.
It's about creating spaces that nurture a sense of community, a sense of belonging. That's when architecture goes beyond just the physical structures, when it becomes about people, about improving lives.
That's beautifully put. And I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive. The Portal family's journey is a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of understanding the past to build a better future, and how something as simple as a Bourekas can offer a delicious glimpse into a complex and fascinating chapter in history. What a story, right? I hope you all enjoyed this deep dive as much as I did.
Me too. It's amazing what we can learn from one family's experiences and how those experiences connect to these larger global issues. The challenges, the triumphs, the Bourekas, it's all a part of the story, and it's a story worth telling.